Hello, and welcome to Redesigning the Math Curriculum with Corequisite Courses, Planning, and Practice. I'm John Britch. I'm a marketing nerd at Knewton. You've entered this conference muted. However, we ask that you please use the question bar early and often to type in questions, which we'll either answer during the session when they come up or during the Q&A section at the end of the session. And at the end, we will actually start opening up microphones for people who raise hands. But during this session, we'll be using the question bar. This session will be recorded, and you'll receive an email with a link to the recording afterwards. So let's meet our facilitators today. Becky, Sharon, Andrew, would you kindly introduce yourselves?
Of course. Hello, I am Becky Moening. I am a content developer at Knewton. I started last November and excited to be here today with you talking about redesign. Sharon?
Yeah, hey everyone, I'm Sharon North. I'm a mathematics professor at St. Louis Community College. I've been teaching there for 21 years. I teach mostly transfer level courses, but all of our Coreqs to those courses as well.
And I'm Andrew Moore from National Louis University, where I'm an assistant professor and the acting department chair. I have about 10 years of teaching experience split between higher ed and secondary special education.
Super, thank you. So our agenda today is about 40 minutes of session content and then a Q&A section. And we've broken it into three main areas: planning, practice, and performance. And you can see the different questions that we strive to answer on screen. But right now, before we get started, we'd love to sort of see where everyone is as far as curriculum redesign. So I'm going to put up a poll. Where is your department in terms of developmental curriculum design? If you could kindly click in and answer, that would be super. And then once we know that everyone has come in, we'll show the results. Okay, I think it looks like we have stabilized with our responses, so I'm going to close and show the results. Which is a third for considering in the process and having already redesigned. So we have a good committee. We have a perfect crowd for this session. Okay, moving on. I will pass the floor to Becky to begin in earnest.
Thank you, John. And yeah, I would say that is quite a nice crowd, having a little bit of everything. So Jonathan, there we go. We're going to talk about planning. Let's go ahead and get this party started. So we are seeing a huge movement toward redesign in developmental education across the country. And the reason we're doing this, it's to increase student success in math and increase graduation rates, right? This is more than just about math. Coreqs are gaining traction in about 80% of states across the country. And basically a Coreq is students are going to start in that credit-bearing course while getting the additional support they need. So there are many different models, and we're going to talk about two of the popular models. So John, could we go ahead, 2 slides, actually? So these are the two most popular co-requisite models across the country. One is the commingled paired course, also known as the accelerated learning program. And it's this model that really, in the credit-bearing course, we have a mixture of students. We have some students who may test in college ready. So those would be the green students in that picture. And then we have those red students who need support. So our credit-bearing course in the commingled model has a little bit of everybody. And that has pros and cons. And depending on what you're teaching, you may find that beneficial. You may find that a hindrance. But in that commingled, the red students or the support needing students will then go either together or separately to a support course of some type. In the cohort model, all students in that credit-bearing course need some level of support. So again, it really depends on what you're teaching, whether or not that may be beneficial to your course. Now, depending, and no matter what model you're taking, you're going to have a lot of different questions that go into it, and we will talk about those throughout the session. So we are very excited to have Sharon and Andrew with us to share their expertise. So Andrew, what advice would you give instructors about planning co-requisite design?
Yeah, so for the goal of your co-requisite design should be what you start with. So at my institute, our goal was we wanted to give our students a pathway to success in their main mathematics course without them getting stuck in that developmental education cycle. And so what we wanted to do was pair our co-requisite course with our main course so that students could go right into their main course with that success. And the good thing about doing it that way is it allowed our students to enroll into their required math course while also providing them that support that the developmental education courses used to give them. Now, when you're going through this process, you do need to be prepared to revise a lot. You know, when I get into my actual practice phase in a little bit here, you'll see that it's gone through multiple iterations at my institute as we've constantly redesigned to try and find what works best for our students. So Sharon, would you like to share a little bit about what you're doing?
Yeah, some advice I'd say is to definitely consider your students' needs. And really, since my students in the Coreq class come to me at a variety of levels of math knowledge, I'd say an adaptive courseware can give the students really a review of those prereq topics right when and where they need it. Also, the students at my institution struggle with finances. So now with using the OpenStax free PDF text and Alta courseware, our students can actually afford to purchase the materials for their class. And I think that we're giving them a higher quality experience. Which, you know, to what we were doing in the past, which is really amazing for our students. Also, you know, I'd say to try to incorporate active learning strategies in your class. So really try to capitalize on your students' strengths and passions. And if you can find your students' skills and talents, then they will have a much more meaningful experience in your Coreq class. Plus, you know, persist and do better in the course.
Yeah, thanks to both of you for that. There are definitely many motivations that are driving redesign. So Sharon, could you share some ideas of what is driving redesign at your institution?
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned it in the opener that our goal really was to increase student success in their credit-bearing math courses. But, you know, what that's going to lead to is increased graduation rates. So our district's developmental redesign team really studied national and statewide data on Coreq support to put together our model. And there have been a whole lot of changes in our state. We now have common student learning outcomes for each of our gen ed math classes. And so we have a math pathways task force in our state that kind of started the work, and the Coreq task force that I served on kind of picked up with then identifying, you know, really the Coreq topics that students need and support. Let's look at the next slide. Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead. I think that's yours, Becky, right?
Yep,
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just keep going. So yeah, this is our model. So we decided to align our math pathways according to student meta majors. And so the courses that I've been teaching the Coreqs in are the co-requisite to our introductory statistics class and to our quantitative reasoning course. For right now, we've left the STEM path alone because we had an accelerated path forward for those students already. But we've had a lot of success with these co-recs, and we're talking about creating a co-rec then to pre-calculus as well, probably starting next year. So yeah, the next slide kind of tells you about really our design of these courses. So for example, our stats class, that's a 4-credit-hour course. And, you know, I'm teaching that class to students with and without learning support needs. So again, as Becky talked about, this is what we would call a blended or intermingled class with and without the students who need those support topics. And again, that sequence of topics is prescribed because now everywhere in our state, we need to hit the same learning objectives for this class. So my co-rec classes typically meet right before the lecture class. They are 2 credit hours. And for right now, all of the students that I have in the co-rec are also in my college level course. So I am the teacher for both of these classes.
Just to reinforce for those of you who've just joined us, please, we have you on mute. You've entered muted, but please enter questions in the question field, and we'll answer them either as they come up during the session or during the Q&A session later on in this webinar. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay, John. I'll just say that with a little bit more about the co-rec, in teaching my co-rec classes, really kind of 3 basic components have emerged from that experience. I typically start off answering questions from the last college level class session or from their Alta homework. I teach my co-recs in computerized classroom, but there are also work tables at the center for group work. So then I can also do kind of an Alta check-in and, you know, make use of the analytics to tell me what they're struggling with. I can also just kind of give some encouragement based on their level of mastery or intervene if the students have not engaged, you know, for a few days. And really the third component, which is really cool, and I had not planned on this at all, my students really love it if I give them a preview of the new content I'll be teaching that day. So what's interesting is, you know, they'll get that little tiny kind of mini lecture, and then in class they hear it again, and then these co-rec students really kind of have emerged as group leaders because, you know, that just helps them a little bit more familiar with.
Great. Sharon, could you talk a little bit about how you align your learning outcomes for your 2 courses?
Yeah, sure. So I had mentioned that we have this new Core 42 initiative in my state, which means students can take this core of 42 gen ed credit hours at any public you know, community college, and it will automatically transfer to any public university in our state. So in doing that, what was created, and you can kind of see here on the far right column, what we need to cover in the math pathways courses. So whether that's stat reasoning, whether it's our quantitative reasoning or our pre-calculus class, we have very prescribed topics that we're teaching. So those were all laid out by our pathways task force. And then if you look at the next column to the left, this is where our co-rec task force laid out the topics a student would need to understand to be successful in the pathways course. So, you know, for example, to create and interpret different types of graphs, whether that be a dot plot or stem and leaf plot. Our students need to know how to, you know, first of all, plot points and shade intervals on a number line. They need to know how to understand and interpret information from tables and graphs. So that's kind of where we started. And what I did then is went through all of the Alta tables of content and in order to identify all of these skills. And in doing that, I kind of came up with a whole numbering system, and you'll see those numbers alongside of many of these different learning objectives. So if we can look at the next one, here's some of the Alta contents. And again, you see all of my numbering system kind of mapping out what was a stat reasoning topic or what was a Coreq topic. And then I went through really most of the Coreq support topics really came from an elementary algebra course. If we look at the next slide. Yeah, so these were all elementary algebra topics. And so I was able to identify all of those. I found a few topics in intermediate algebra and just a couple in, the college algebra, TOC, for example, an introduction to summation notation that happened to be in the college algebra content. And so then I just, again, identified all of the content that needed to come in to our class, not only as the college level content, but the support content as well. And yeah, let me just add, I guess, real quick. So this, if you go back just a second, John, kind of this work all started, I think wow, I was doing this back in November of 2017. And that kind of turned out to be the same time that Knewton was putting together Coreq classes. So kind of going through this process really helped me with solidifying what exactly needed to happen in the Coreq classes. But it was also helpful in developing these Coreq classes for Knewton to the Stats QR and STEM pathway. Okay, so Andrew, do you want to share why you chose Alta?
Yeah, and really before I get started on the planning phase, I do want to comment that in Illinois, we've actually started our own process very similar to what you're going through, Sharon, of having a core of general education courses where my university is actually in the process of filing all of our paperwork to become a member of that partnership. So all of our learning objectives and everything like that had to align. And one of the things they have on there is required Coreqs for a lot of the courses. So this is definitely something that is permeating all aspects of higher education for sure.
That's cool.
Yeah, and so we actually started planning our Coreqs. We implemented them in the fall of 2016 or 2015, actually, when we launched a new program at National Louis University that back then was called our Pathways program. And so we had our main course, our Math 101 Quantitative Reasoning course, which has been the main focus of our Corequisite redesign because a majority of our students go through that course. And so we really wanted to go in with the approach of reducing our DFW rates in that course. And one of the things that we had found through our research was this idea of just-in-time interventions, things like that. So we started really doing a lot of research, looking into different tools, things like that. We'd used a variety of different tools, and one of the big things that we kept coming across was we wanted to make sure we were using an adaptive tool. And so one of the big things that we found out with a lot of the different programs other than Alta that we tried out, the adaptive tool was not the main component of the program, or it wasn't as adaptive as you'd really like. It was more, a bank of 3 to 5 questions about a certain type. And if a student got one right, then they moved on past the whole bank, but then they had these other options. So Alta was our final choice because it had the just-in-time interventions that we needed. It was a truly adaptive tool. And as Sharon pointed out a little bit earlier, especially for a lot of my students as well, the cost of textbooks and some of the other applications can be pretty prohibitive. So that lower cost of Alta definitely really helps. So if you want to move me on to the next slide here. So this is back to Sharon talking a little, Sharon talking about how she does the backwards mapping.
Actually, this is mine. This is Becky.
Sorry, Becky.
That's okay. Actually, much of Sharon's work in Missouri has helped us at Knewton refine our Coreq offerings. So Sharon kind of talked about how that was all happening at the same time, and she has been very helpful in helping Knewton become better at Coreqs. So one service we do provide at Knewton to all of our adopters is this backward mapping process. We do this for standalone courses as well as co-requisite courses. And basically, just like Sharon described, you can give us your syllabus or your list of objectives, and we will put them into a nice, organized spreadsheet mapped to an Alta course. So if you are talking statistics, we can map it to the Alta statistics, and then backwards map so that we can show where those necessary skills for the prerequisite skills are located in, whether it's a similar Alta course if you need one course for your two Coreqs, or if you need two separate Alta courses, we can make all of that work. So if we go to the next slide, please, John. Basically, we want to take that heavy lifting off of you as faculty. We know that as faculty, you have a lot to do, and spending time digging through learning objectives and table of contents, I mean, Sharon can tell you, it takes a lot of time. So we want to take that for you. Knewton has dedicated teams who work with faculty not just on this backwards mapping, but on implementation and everything else. So anything that you need, we have a consultation process that will best fit your needs, however we can do that. So thank you, Sharon, and the state of Missouri for helping us make this a better process.
Sure.
Yeah, so let's go on. Let's go on to the practice phase at this point. So Andrew, let's hear about how redesign evolved at your school.
Yeah, so I mentioned it a little bit earlier that we do a lot of that we've gone through a lot of redesigns at my institute, and we actually finally are satisfied with where we're at. And so there's not a future redesign coming this summer, so that's good. But I do want to walk you kind of through how we got to where we are now. So when I first started at National Louis University, they had our course, our Math 101 course was a 5-quarter credit hour course that had a 0-hour co-requisite attached to it. And that co-requisite was really more of a 3-hour study lab. So we had students were assigned to a classroom, and then all of the instructors in our program were assigned to one of those rooms too. So you can almost think of it as like a 3-hour window of office hours for all of our instructors. And that had its benefits, and sometimes it didn't. But the big thing was it wasn't a math co-requisite. It was just a co-requisite for all of our courses. So when we go into the fall of 2016, we launch our first real co-requisite math course. And so we reduced our Math 101 down to a 4-quarter credit hour course, and then had a 1 credit hour co-requisite that all students took. And back then, we were using Knewton back then in what's called an emporium model, where the students had about an hour and they were in a room with a math instructor, but they would get onto Knewton and they would pick whatever topics that they wanted to from the developmental education course that they were enrolled in and work on that for an hour. Good things and bad things, and I'll talk about those in just a little bit here. Continuing our evolution though, the next year, we wanted to get rid of the emporium model. Just it made data tracking really hard, and it did make working with groups of students difficult. You were almost always working with an individual because they were on different topics. And so moving into the fall 2017, we had a structured assignment where what it would be is our assignments would be about a week or 2 weeks ahead of the skills that were needed in their main course. So thinking about in our quantitative reasoning course, when they would get near probability, the developmental education course would really focus a lot on the operations with fractions and decimals to help them be prepared for that. So now our current iteration of the course though Next slide, please. There we go. So our current one, we did move it back up to a 5-quarter credit hour course and then have a 0 credit hour co-requisite. And we no longer require all students in Math 101 to go through the co-requisite. We've now focused it just to the students who would traditionally fall into developmental education at most universities. Now, for us, that's still about 70 to 80% of our students that go through the co-requisite. Now, moving it down to the 0 credit hours for the co-requisite, we did want to maintain some stakes in that. So 10% of a student's main course grade does come from the work that they do in that co-requisite course. And so right now, the way our co-requisite runs, it's a 3-hour block of time taught by a different instructor than their main course. And in that 3-hour block of time, there's about 30 to 45 minutes that begins where the instructor takes a look at the Alta dashboard and uses the data that's provided there to decide what topics to review at the beginning of the course, really looking at the student body as a whole and where they're struggling. Then they spend about an hour working on those foundational skills in Knewton, so generally a short presentation or a lesson, and then the students jump right into Alta and get practicing on whatever that foundational skill is. Then we like to wrap up the thing with kind of an extension workshop where we have our students work in small groups, working on applied problems that really build those basic skills and show them the real world context that a lot of the basic skills like using fractions have.
Great, thank you, Andrew. Can you continue talking about how your co-requisite course design has changed the role of instructors on your campus?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so like I said, when we first started, or when I first started at National Louis, they had this 3-hour, study hall, for lack of a better term for it. And it was great because students knew exactly when office hours were because they were the same for all of their professors. It was great because you never had somebody try and schedule a meeting during your office hours or any conflicts like that. The bad thing is that some students would walk in the door, sign in attendance, tell you that they were going to go work with somebody in another room, disappear for 2.5 hours into downtown Chicago, and then reappear at the end of the 3rd hour to sign out. Or, some students would just use it to work. It was a variety of different things. But for our instructors, sometimes they would be bored and they would start getting grading done or things like that, which then kind of put up that barrier again for the students not wanting to interrupt you while you're working on something. And so we've really been working on making sure that the co-requisite instructor is a very active member of our classroom. And so when we moved into that Emporium model, then that was when we first started using the Knewton Alta product, and instructors would be tracking the data, and then they could look at the students' data to determine what kind of recommendations to either the student or to the math specialist. But like I said, that was really hard because you would have to jump between every student's individual progress to see how they were doing because they weren't working on the same assignment. So now in our most recent iterations and our current iteration, our instructors use nearly live data feeds to track student progress as they're working. So our students all have laptops or are in a computer lab during their co-requisite time, and they're working on those developmental skills in Knewton. And the instructor has the assignment that all the students are working on pulled up and can see the data filling in as students begin working, and allows you to immediately see who's struggling, who's in progress, who's completed. You can see all the different aspects of where students are, and it allows a student to sit there and work, and then you to know that they're struggling and to come up and ask them if you can help them without them needing to ask for it. Because one of the big things we all know is students asking for help does not happen as often as it really needs to. So that definitely helps us make sure our students get that just-in-time intervention that they need so that they don't get discouraged and quit.
Fabulous. Andrew, would you be willing to show us some of your dashboard?
Yeah, so I have a demo course here. So as soon as, there we go. Okay. There we go. So this is what the Knewton dashboard, the Knewton Alta dashboard looks like when you first get in. So I'm in my course, my college algebra course here, and I'm going to go into one of my sections. And so because of FERPA, this is all kind of just made up data that Knewton has worked on, but this is exactly what it would look like for you when you get in. So you can see I'm now on my section page. So you'll have your course page, which then all of your sections for that particular course are kind of parented under. And so going down, you can see we have our assignments, we have quiz grades, and test grades, all kind of broken up into their own tabs. I'm going to focus on the assignment because that's what we use the most at my school. And so as I go down, you can see I've got my assignments listed here, and there is some filtering. I can see all assignments due up to this point, recent or upcoming. So I'm just going to go to all assignments, and a few things to notice here. You can see the name of the section, when it's due, but then you can also see this course average mastery and the number of students that are struggling in one. So I'm actually going to go into this one here with my most struggling students. And so now what I'm in is I'm in the assignment page. And from here on my overall status, you can see I have 3 students who have completed the assignment. And if I click on that green bar, it filters down to them. So I could quickly select all of them and hit this email button and just send them a congratulations for getting done email. That's one of the things that's really been helpful about Alta, is actually enabling that positive reinforcement has been made a lot easier. I can see my students who are in progress, so maybe send them an email of, hey, this assignment's coming due soon, make sure that you get working on it. But where I really want to focus are these other 2 groups, my struggling group and my not started group. So obviously my not started group, those are the students that need to email and be like, hey, this is due today. Please get started on this before it becomes late. But for my struggling students, these are the students that you want to be able to look at and see, well, why are they struggling, right? And so if I go into a student here, what I can see is I can actually see which learning objective this student was struggling on. So finding the slope of a line given 2 points, 100% mastery of that. Well, understanding the relationship between slope and the y-intercept of a line and its equation, that's where the student is struggling. So if I go down here in their learning activity, this has really been one of the most helpful tools for me. I can go in, I can see, well, what instructional material did they see? And I'm not going to play them right now because it would probably be choppy over the webinar, but I could see the instructional videos that the students saw. I can see the questions that they were able to get correct. And then I can look at the questions that they got incorrect and really allow me to see, is there something that's going on here? And even if I click on a question, I can actually see what this student entered as their answers to really help me with my feedback. Now, Alta did provide the correct answer and feedback to the student while they were working. But when I go back and do my review at the end, I can see this and say, there's something clearly disconnected for the student. Now, that's just on one part. There is a lot of data, and you can definitely spend a lot of time exploring in here. If you want to see a student rather than an assignment, if you go under your student tab, then you can see your students. And if I go to Sarah again, let's see if she's struggling anywhere else. So I can see she's completed a lot of her assignments, but she does have some struggling late assignments, some in progress assignments. And so I can really work with this student to help her get back on track pretty easily by taking a look at the data, seeing what I have there, and really working with her. And so this has really enabled me to give students really helpful feedback, help me recommend to tutoring services, things like that, and be able to tell the tutor, these are the exact learning objectives that that student needs to work on. So there's a lot of data here and a lot of interaction that you can definitely do with this. So I'm going to pass it back to Becky and Sharon, where Sharon is going to tell us a little bit about how she uses the dashboard there. So
Great, thanks, Andrew.
there we go.
And you should be able to see the screen now.
Yeah. So this is just a screen capture from my statistics class last fall. And, here I can just get, first of all, an overview of where my students all are, where their level of mastery is, and how long have they been, if they are active and working, or if they've become inactive. And then if we look at the next slide, yeah, here's where then I can see exactly what they might be struggling with or they may have mastered. So, for example, I have some students struggling with the different properties of a discrete probability density function, and maybe one struggling as well with finding the mean of a discrete probability density function. So this helps to inform my teaching. I mean, definitely in the Coreq, I want to hit this, but also in my college level class, then I can spend, a few minutes trying to hit these topics again to make sure my students are in good shape.
All right, let's move to the performance phase. And I know you both have fabulous data from last fall. So Sharon, how did Alta affect student performance in your Corequisite classrooms?
Yeah. So I think one thing that is really important to note, I had mentioned about our students struggling financially and me moving toward open educational resources so that all my students had access. Well, last semester, as well as this semester, 100% of my students have been able to purchase the courseware, which is amazing. So first of all of my students have access to these high quality materials. Certainly this idea of my students getting the support help when they begin to struggle, for example, being offered up an instructional piece as well as a video when they start to struggle, is really important. And then having those analytics that Andrew just showed you and I just showed you a couple of screens of to inform my teaching has been really helpful in my Coreq work. And so last semester, 71.4% of the Coreq stat students passed the college level class. And actually that turned out to be the same as the overall class pass rate. So this is really amazing because these students came into this college level class. I mean, yes, they did have that support, but they came to us initially with, lower level skills, let's say. They weren't, up to the level that we had hoped they would be for the college level course, but they were able to perform at the same rate and pass at the same rate as the overall class, which was really, really amazing. And we were all very happy about that.
That is great. Andrew, what about you and your results?
Yeah, so mine were equally amazing as Sharon's, right? I had a 71% pass rate for students enrolled in the Corequisite and in their quantitative reasoning course, which was a 75% for the students not enrolled in a Corequisite. So nearly the same pass rate, really closing that gap there was amazing. But more importantly, 28% of the students enrolled in the Corequisite course ended up getting an A in their main course, really showing how important having those basic math, those developmental education skills in place, because we only had 18% of our other students, our students not enrolled in the Corequisite, achieve an A as well. And then on our math skills diagnostic test, we had a 38% average growth on that. So our student who performed the least amount of growth had a 20% improvement on her placement exam, whereas another student had a 50% improvement. So we definitely had a lot of growth in those skills, really. And I mean, the point of those Corequisite developmental education courses should be to help build up those skills, and we clearly see that that's helping here. So
That is great. I honestly cannot wait to hear how this spring goes for both of you and see the data for another semester. So Andrew and Sharon, thank you both for sharing your experiences, not just with Alta, but also with your co-requisite courses. So just to kind of refresh your mind on Alta, there is a lot of flexibility, and both Andrew and Sharon talked about that. We can control for all types of Coreq implementations. We offer the backward mapping service along with other services to help you implement in your own classroom. If you are interested in a backwards mapping, when John sends out the follow-up email, just go ahead and respond to that and we will get you taken care of. And Alta is the only system that starts students on goal topic and offers just-in-time remediation, videos, forced readings, different types of instruction when students need it. So we don't bog students down with unneeded remediation. We only give it to them when they actually need it. And our goal is to help students reach mastery so they can be better in your classrooms. So John, to you.
Okay, we're going to open up to questions, which you can type in the questions bar, or if you'd like, hit the icon, the hand icon, and we'll unmute your microphone and you can ask it live. Becky, one question. How long does it take to do a backwards mapping?
You know, John, that's a great question. It really depends on a lot of things. Of course, it depends on the course, the design of the course, if we're putting it in one Alta course or two. Generally, I can do a full backwards mapping for a Coreq course in anywhere from 3 to 5 hours. In terms of the turnaround time of when a faculty member asks for that and when it gets returned, usually takes about a week, just to kind of make sure we have all of the questions answered and then to get that into my schedule so I can get it completed. So that's, and I've done a lot of mapping, so it goes a little quicker these days than it used to.
A question has come in. Do students get overwhelmed with the number of outcomes if shown all at once at the start of a semester?
I can address that. I don't know. You know, like when you lay out your course, you really can choose, you know, the format for laying out the materials. So, for example, in one of my classes, my calc class, I have everything laid out by chapters, but my stats and QR class, I lay it out by weeks. The calc class was huge because I had created a 3-semester course. And so I had mentioned to, you know, some of the people at Alta that this is kind of overwhelming for my students to see so much content. So they were able to remove that from the student view. So the students were just seeing one semester at a time. I don't think, you know, that any of my students would say it's too overwhelming. It's just kind of laid out like a syllabus would be, or a calendar, you know, for your class on here are the chapters we cover, here are the weeks in the semester. I don't know. Andrew, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, so my students see all of the topics and they do have the 2 separate courses. Their main course and co-requisite are split up, so it doesn't look like so much. But I mean, honestly, you give your students your syllabus at the beginning of the quarter that, well, at least at my school, we list all of the assignments there. So the student would see them whether they were, you know, looking at the syllabus or looking at Knewton. So, I mean, I haven't really heard my students say like, oh, this is too much. But we're also a quarter school, so our courses are a little bit shorter. We generally only have about 20 to 30 assignments built into ours. So,
Question, how did you categorize to see just the weekly schedule through Knewton, or did you do that through an LMS integration?
So I do mine just through Knewton. I'm not using an LMS. So, you know, what I would do then is I go through, for example, I was already really familiar with the OpenStax book because before I began to use Knewton, I had used them for, I don't know, 2 years perhaps before I moved over to the Knewton platform. So that's just how the logical way to group the data, I thought, either by chapter or week. Andrew, you use an LMS with yours though, right?
Yeah, we have ours integrated with D2L, and as far as like our gradebook, everything like that, it's really smooth. It's incredibly easy to use, so I've really liked that.
And just to clarify, if you're using something other than D2L, Alta integrates with Canvas, Blackboard, Moodle. Did I leave any out, Becky?
I don't think so. We definitely integrate with all major LMS, and it's seamless. It's very, very easy, very quick. Our implementation team can help walk you through that.
Oh, here's an interesting question. We at no point during this session actually said what Alta costs. So right now, Alta is $44, but we are lowering the price after August 1st. The price will be $39.95 per semester. We also provide Alta, students get a monthly subscription for $9.95 a month. That's great for short courses. And we also have something new called Alta Pass, which for $79.95 gives students a 2-year access to any of our courses in a particular subject area, that subject area being defined very broadly. So it's really math. So all their math courses for that 2-year period for $79.95. Any other questions? This is the last call for questions since we are at time, and we want to respect your time. Any last call for questions? Either raise your hand or type it in. Okay, so we are at the end of our session, but if any questions come to you afterwards, remember I'll be sending out an email that will have a link to the recording, and you can just hit reply and ask away, and we'll get your questions answered. We can set you up with a demo course or a more in-depth demonstration of Alta. So that's it. So thank you so much for coming, and thank you to our moderators today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate your time.
Have a good one.
Goodbye.